Arcwood Financial, LLC, Arcwood Benefits Consulting, and Arcwood HR. As you know, as collectively as Arcwood, we are independent companies of which we do not offer tax or legal advice, which is why we have our guest speakers like Dennis and Matt join us. We'd like to have them provide those details to you. But our overall goal of the town halls is really just to make sure that we can have an avenue to talk about information, help clarify it, and then also, just to provide some tools and resources for you to really help, navigate the waters for COVID and just, everything else that's going on in our lives right now. But with that, we do want to shift over to Dennis Hall, give him an opportunity to share some thoughts and some knowledge on just some things that we have learned, again, just I think from the nation down to an organization as far as kind of how the virus is working. Or possibly not working for that matter. I know we're at about 5 to 2. Clearly, we'll be going over, so I hope you guys can hang with us. We're probably about 20 minutes out, and I'll schedule 90 minutes for the next meeting. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your diligence through this with us. And with this, Dennis, I will turn it over to you. Mr. Hall, are you still with us?
I'm here.
There you are.
I'm here, yes. I'd like to focus a little bit because I've been thinking about and concerned about what employers need to do in maintaining the workforce. We've all reached kind of a new normal at the moment. We wonder, when is that going to change? The most important thing to understand as an employer is that you first have to understand the virus and where we are. And for a few reasons. One, to decide what you can do with your place of employment and your employees. The second is that is the main thing we need to do in order to protect our employees, is to improve our, I would call it our virus education, which has been, I think, a little bit deficient. So I spend a lot of time reading the epidemiologist right now and the data reports. And this is where we are. Poland, we have a problem. This was August 1st in Poland on a beach. This is obviously going to be the issue. It's going to be the issue, as you said, your children, your teenagers to college, whether bars should open. How do we determine what's the metric that we should have for when we get to change? All right. First thing, and if we hit the next slide. The most important thing about understanding the virus is that it is a hitchhiker. It doesn't have any means of locomotion. Viruses don't have legs, they don't have arms, they don't have wings. They depend upon hitchhiking. So there's one reason that understanding viruses is so difficult. Here, this virus, we've found out, and we have to think of two very important terms. One is, how contagious is it? That is, how effective is it at finding some host to hitchhike on? And this virus, we're the host now. The spillover started from some animal, we don't know what animal, it went to the human population, and we are now the host. In order for the virus to spread, it needs to find new host. And it has to hitchhike on us, which is why the beach photo is very disconcerting. And so keep this concept in mind. The virus is a hitchhiker. Next slide, please. Now, one epidemiologist who I really like to follow is Michael Osterholm. He published a New York Times piece recently, and he contends that in order to crush the virus, that is, what he characterizes our current state of affairs is that we are in the midst of a vast forest fire. That's our virus today. In order to get control of this forest fire, we need to reduce the virus spread to less than 1 new case per day per 100,000 people. Right? And the concept is really very simple. If you're in a group of 100,000 people and only 1 per 100,000 have it, then the chance of the virus hitching a ride on you is very, very low. There are obviously other ways we reduce the chance of it becoming a hitchhiker. Physical distance is one, mask is another. We've all learned these techniques now, and the more we follow them, the better off we are. Not for the purpose of protecting ourselves. Sometimes that's way too overemphasized. this really is a mathematical societal problem. You know, obviously, if we have large crowds, reduced distance, higher infection rates, higher than 1 per 100,000, the chance of the virus jumping from host to host increases dramatically, and it increases exponentially, and we end up in a forest fire. What Osterholm says is, and he's very persuasive, is that if we get the virus rate down in the countries that have gotten it down to 1 per 100,000, then are in the process of putting out brush fires. When it pops up, we're able to isolate, identify, keep it from spreading more quickly. Next slide, please. All right. So he's asking what happens next. Well, we have our students that are going back to college. Now, how do we decide whether they should or shouldn't go back? Well, at the moment, we have a very high infection rate, and we know that this is a highly contagious virus. The other thing which is very important is that it's not only contagious, but it has a low, kind of a low infectious rate. For example, Ebola is, how was it transferred? It was transferred in blood. So even though it was difficult to transfer, and so it wasn't highly contagious, but it had a terribly high infection rate. 70% of people who contracted Ebola died. Then what would happen is you would get control of the transmission by blood. The virus couldn't find a new host, and it disappears. We still don't know where Ebola comes from, what the animal is that contains it, which results in the spillover to humans. We don't know that for this either, which in the long run is very difficult for us. But here, because our infection rate is still so high, what Osterholm says, and this is Osterholm again, that we didn't shut down enough. We didn't shut down seriously enough. He said that 78% of the jobs in Minnesota were considered to be important enough not to shut down. And our infection rate has remained too high, which leaves us with this mathematical problem. We are living with the virus rather than controlling it. Next slide, please. I took some numbers from the CDC today and transformed them into per 100,000, which the good Dr. Osterholm wants to be at 1. And these numbers, depending on where you look, float around, but you can see that they're much, much, much higher than 1. In fact, you know, I just looked at, if you think about it, Arizona has a population of 7.3 million, which means a 1% rate would be 73 cases a day. They're generally stating these in week-long periods. So we're about, we might be about 500 a week, and we're way above that, you know, all over the country. So we're not close to controlling this. So next slide, please. What does this mean? Well, for your employees and looking at your office, you need to recognize that this is a highly contagious virus, that even though only about less than 1% of people die, a lot more of the people have complications, even though that's very low. And what's complicated about this is that people can have the virus, be asymptomatic, and still transmit it. All right? That's really disconcerting. That means in order to get social control of this, we need to treat everyone as if they're contagious, whether they're symptomatic or not. So simply taking their temperature and saying, great, let them in, that doesn't work. Simply saying we're going to test them sometimes, that may help. You have to question how good the tests are. And then there's the issue, of course, people are concerned about whether, well, if we just get, we get herd immunity. We love the idea of herd immunity. Well, that depends on a concept called durability, which is that if you develop the antibodies because you either get a vaccine or you've had the disease, how long does that protection last? We don't know. I saw the first study in the last week or so, and it suggested, and this is just one study, and obviously we're really way behind yet understanding the durability of these protections, but it suggested that the durability of having had COVID and preventing a reinfection is 3 months. That's not very good. that's again bad news for us. We're going to have a question when we do get a vaccine of its durability and its effectiveness. Even though it will help, it's not going to be perfect. We need to understand that even though there's a tendency perhaps for half the population not to get this virus, it also depends simply on the amount of exposure that any individual gets. It's called a threshold amount. So even if you have a tendency not to get it, if you get a large threshold of the disease, of the virus, you might end up getting it. So again, we have to go forward and understand these concepts and think about them if you want to bring your employees back to work. Bring them back to work, you're going to have to make certain that they have physical distance. You're going to have to make certain that that you have a small number of people at a time. You're going to have to protect the workplace and your employees in the workplace. Perhaps what you want to do is to do testing every week of a percentage of the people who are in the office. Understand what your herd is doing. We're still not there, and even though we're suffering a little bit from overload, and this is still very real. As we can see, we went, as Ostrom points out, after the first shutdown, we went way down in May 28th, but it's come back with a vengeance, and it might continue to do so. Next slide, please. Okay, so remember this. The term is zoonotic. The virus original host is some animal, and we don't know what animal it is. There was a virus in the 1990s, 2000 in Australia that was hosted in bats and then transmitted to horses, and vets and other people were getting it. The zoonotic nature of it makes this difficult. And like I say, with some viruses, if we don't know what animal it's in, like Ebola, we don't know how to protect it coming back. Again, physical distance, mask, be aware of asymptomatic people are still possibly going to result in spillover to other people, that you can't rest. You need to continue in the workplace these restrictions and beware of all the host. So that's all the happy news. We're going to be living with this for a little bit until we either get an effective vaccine, and even if we get effective treatments, that will help, but that's not really going to give us a lot of happiness until we are able to control this explosion of the disease amongst our society, which means that we really have to be aware as much as possible about crowds and transmission. And the one thing we know about this is that it's not, as they originally told us, a surface disease. It is an airborne transmission. It is something that affects the lungs, but it also can really affect the heart. And we need to avoid that airborne transmission. So it's not a good time to go to a rave or a concert or whatever 19-year-old college students tend to do. So
did you just say a rave?
A rave, yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
Well, thank you, Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
So the takeaway in the summary is we're nowhere near out of the woods. We have to maintain our diligence on it. And if we are going to be reopening up our offices, then really taking the steps necessary that we've outlined in the previous town halls of the social distancing, the shields, the schedules, shifting schedules, and things like that. And that seems like it's going to continue for quite some time. Yes,
maintain physical distance, make people wear a mask. Less is more. Obviously, if you're running a call center, you're going to be very different because this is airborne, right? So,
right.
And of course, you've got to worry about your air circulation system. And you really have to see everyone as being potentially someone who can give you the virus. If I was sending my child off to college today, they wouldn't be coming home for weekends. wouldn't let it
Well, they
happen.
wouldn't ever get any laundry done then.
Well, I know you were pampered, but no, you just don't let him come home. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dennis, for that update. I appreciate that.